This is Success Stories, a program of the Sorrell College of Business at Troy University. I'm Alan Mendenhall, Associate Dean of the Sorrell College of Business and Executive Director of the Manuel H. Johnson Center for Political Economy. Success Stories is a program that highlights the lives and careers of people who have accomplished great things. And my guest today is Chad Jones, President and CEO of First Bank of Alabama, and he is a Troy alumnus, and I'm really looking forward to hearing about the great things that you've accomplished. We'll start by just talking a little bit about the First Bank of Alabama, what it is, where it got its name.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Mendenhall. So First Bank of Alabama, founded in 1848, we're the oldest continuously operated institution or banking institution in the state of Alabama. We're the third oldest in the Southeast and the 36th oldest in the nation. So we celebrate our 175th this year, and looking forward to it. We started out as a small little mercantile facility there in Talladega, Alabama. We're headquartered in Talladega, and throughout the years, through around 1980s, we were just three little locations, and we were first known as the First National, Isbell National Bank, I'm sorry. And in the 70s, we changed our name to First National Bank of Talladega. And in 2015, we recognized that the way to grow outside of the Talladega market and the Talladega County area was for us to change our name. So essentially, we changed it to First Bank of Alabama. And since then, we have grown from 3 locations in 1 county. We're now up to 12 locations in 6 counties, and we serve most of East Central Alabama. It is a company that I grew up around, growing up in Talladega, and I came back home in 2007, and so I've had 15 wonderful years of helping to grow the bank, and it has just something that I never thought that would happen to this old Talladega boy.
Well, I had the privilege of hearing this Talladega boy speak to some of our students in the Sorrell College of Business earlier today, and you highlighted the importance of character to business, not just individual character, but sort of organizational character and what that means for a corporation, or in your case, a bank. Could you talk a little bit about that, because so many of our viewers are young people?
Sure, absolutely. So the one thing that I spoke with the students earlier about were the 5 C's of credit. And I had the question of what's the most important thing you think about whenever you talk about leadership. And certainly I look at the character side of things. In the 5 C's of credit, you can lose your collateral, you can lose your credit, you can lose your cash flow. But if you have the character to remain, to fulfill your obligations, that is the most important thing that we see from the banking perspective and in life in general. You know, the only thing that you can really carry with you to the grave is your character. You can't, you know, the hearse doesn't have a back seat that carries all of your money with you, and it certainly can't carry your possessions, but certainly you can carry your character.
So I want to rewind a little bit and talk about your time as a student at Troy University. We were talking today about the buildings. Some were there, some weren't there. There are some new things, there's some old things that are missing, and we had some fun conversations. But you began as an accounting major and decided to switch to marketing.
I did.
And so I want to hear a little bit about that story, but in talking about it, if you could also mention what it takes to be in banking, because so many students think that you have to take one path to banking, and there are a lot of different ways to work for banks.
Yeah, so going down to Troy, I really had no idea what I wanted to be, and I thought of this great idea of maybe an attorney. I wanted to be an attorney, and then I realized that they had to read a lot, and so that was not in my deck of cards, and it certainly wasn't on my calendar. So I changed to accounting, and Dr. Tom Ratcliffe was at the time the advisor that my mom and I met with, and got signed up for it, and took a couple of classes and got into Chuck Thompson's economics class. And he and I had a lot of conversations from outside the classroom, also inside the classroom. And he came to me one day and he said, "Chad, please see me after class. We need to have a discussion." And the discussion was more about where my degree was going and what area I was in. And so he talked to me about being a marketing major. Had no idea what marketing was about. And at the time, I just sort of, I took his advice and became that marketing major, hoping to one day go out and sell people, and sell goods and services and be a business development officer. But what I found is really whenever you do a job that you really just enjoy going to every day and having the people skills and the leadership opportunities and the background just to be able to get your job accomplished, that's where you can really take forth, the marketing major was just it was a footprint. It was a pathway for me to go that next step, but it was my genuine curiosity of how a bank works. How does an income statement work? What's on the balance sheet? What drives the ROA, the ROE, the ROI? Those were the things that I learned after I got into banking. And in speaking with my daughter on the way down this morning, we talked about the pathway to get into a bank. And my question was, where do you start? And the starting place is to find the culture, to find an institution that lines up with who you are and what you want to do. And do they give that opportunity for you to grow yourself? And I felt like that's something that culturally and just through our business, we've had to adapt and not be the old way of banking in community bank world. So, first and foremost, you can get in through accounting and auditing, compliance, BSA, which stands for Bank Secrecy Act. You can get in through operations. You can come in through the sales side, through the branch consumer side, commercial loans, marketing that handles our Facebook and all of our social media accounts. HR, human resources is huge for us. And human resources is the very front door to how you come in. You're going to generally go and look at someone's website, find out do they have a website that is accommodating for resumes, job postings, etc. And then from there, it's what fits you best. And if you just don't know, then maybe you start with a teller position. And the teller position is the most commonly known bank position for any new banker. They meet, they greet, they handle people's money, and then in your sales environment, is where more people are going to experience the interaction with the customer as far as making recommendations and such. So there are certainly ways to get in, and we're always looking for good people to come into the banking industry. Certainly have plenty of open availability out in the marketplace, and the old brick and mortar of banking is not dying the way that they said that it would way back when. We're actually still taking that opportunity and growing our footprint with bricks and mortar, ATMs, digital, online, etc. And so as you transform and move forward into the banking world, there are still plenty of opportunities to be a successful employee.
What are some of the biggest challenges facing community banks these days? Are they regulatory? Are they, are they demographic with the, people moving here or there? What are some of the biggest challenges?
Well, in smaller communities, it's certainly it's harder to maintain the workforce. In your smaller communities, you will see that people sometimes you don't have the people that you need to fully build out your bank. But certainly the regulatory guidelines are tough. Anytime that we see an administration change in DC, the tides will also change. We will see a little bit more scrutiny in some places and in some areas, and then it becomes a little bit more lax in others. And so what may be today's hot topic may not be tomorrow's hot topic. Right now, hot topic is liquidity and funding. And So banks have seen a huge influx of cash that came from COVID funds, and that, of course, flushed the market. As the liquidity started to get more squeezed with the government competition, is what I'll call it, as you've seen interest rates rise, we have started to see that accounts are moving, or people are moving their money out of investments such as CDs or money market accounts, savings accounts, and they're putting it into bonds and treasuries. And so whenever you take that money out of a bank that is your local community provider for funding for cars or personal funds or housing, et cetera, we as community banks are here to serve our communities. But whenever the deposits roll out and we're competing with the federal government that may have a little higher interest rate than what our deposit funds are, makes it pretty doggone tough.
Chancellor Jack Hawkins was a guest on this program, and he's also one of the chief reasons why you chose to go to Troy University. What is that story?
Absolutely. So Dr. Hawkins, of course, was in Talladega at Alabama Institute for Deaf and Blind, he and his wife and family, years prior to me ever even thinking about even going to college. The opportunity for me to go to Troy was my mom and I showed up on Troy's campus knowing that we had been introduced to Dr. Hawkins from a family friend back in Talladega that worked for Dr. Hawkins at the Institute. And whenever we got there, Dr. Hawkins started asking me a myriad of questions, one that was more so pertaining to leadership. He asked me what activities I was involved in at school and how did I see myself. And what he was getting at is, did I see myself as a leader? And he identified me as a leader, if not just a leader, a person with leadership potential. He invited me to come to Troy and take a look at the scholarship for the leadership scholarship, and that provided me my first inroad into Troy. Of course, being able to look at the golf team and other things of that nature really intrigued me, and that summer orientation just brought me in there. I look back at my time and go, I could have gone where all of my other friends went, Alabama, Auburn, etc. However, I chose the school that was best for me, and it helped me to develop leadership skills, leadership qualities. The friends that I met there, the peers that I surrounded myself with are leaders in their own right today. And I think that it's very evident in the city of Troy, as one of my fraternity brothers leads that city as the mayor. He was one of the first persons to take me under his wing and say, come on, let me go show you some of these things that we're going to do around here. So just having peers of leaders and having someone see something in me that I couldn't see in myself caused me to look deeper and to dig deeper and to find that leadership quality, and then acknowledge that I too can help lead as we walk forward.
Well, you and I are sort of in that in-between phase. We're not young, we're not old. Sure. We can learn a lot from young college students in terms of what they can bring to the workplace. Absolutely. They've got social media skills, they understand a segment of the culture, the younger generation in ways that we don't, and so they can bring to bear a lot of things to a company. But there are also things that they need to rely on the older generations for, things that they need to learn. And we talked a little bit with students today about those things, and students had lots of questions. And I'm wondering, in your experience, what are some things that you think would be really, really helpful for young people to learn how to do, whether it's personal finance or whether it's just etiquette?
Etiquette's great. Personal finance is great. But always knowing that asking a question it doesn't mean that you don't know anything. It means you don't know what you don't know. And to ask a question is certainly an appropriate thing to do. If you don't understand something, ask about it. Ask how can I help? How can I get involved? How does this work? Explain to me so I can better understand it. What I find most of the time in our banking world, whether it be through our customer base or whether it be through our employee base, the pride of I'm going to take care of this without having to ask the question can sometimes cause more chaotic situations than if they just better understood the question or and how to get to that answer. It's an easy thing to do. I certainly would not know how an atomic bomb works, but I could ask. And you know, certainly the source from which you gain your knowledge is also important. So I think it was Mark Twain that maybe said, if you don't read the newspaper, you're misinformed, and if you do read the newspaper, then you're ill-informed. And I sort of take that to heart. You know, what that tells me is there are multiple sources out there, and so whenever you do ask a question, make sure that you're finding out all angles. You know, just one point of view is not always the right point of view. It's not always the wrong point of view, but certainly asking questions is very important.
Well, you didn't just graduate from Troy and become president and CEO of the bank. What's the story behind it? What was the trajectory?
Sure. So story behind it was I got into banking while I was in college, and it was in '96 that I had a wonderful friend that I'd met at Troy Country Club, and his name is Gary Guthrie, and he was the president and CEO of Troy Bank and Trust. And he asked me, he said, "Chad, what are you going to do whenever you grow up?" And I said, "I guess I'm just going to have a real job like you." And I think that he took that to mean that I was looking for a job. I think he more so knew that it was just he and I goofing off and cutting up. But he gave me my first start. And from that opportunity, it grew into background of deposit operations at Troy Bank and Trust for the nighttime processing. Then it became the daytime processing. Later became, after I graduated with my marketing degree, Mr. Guthrie appointed me as the marketing director for a short period of time, which Diana Lee, who is just now recently retired from Troy Bank and Trust, I say that I got my break and opportunity because she went and had triplets. And so with that, I had a fraternity brother who reached out and had moved over to Savannah and started working for a larger bank. And he called me and said, "Chad, I've served on executive council with you in the fraternity, and certainly think that this would be a great opportunity for you to come over and be a part of a larger banking organization." And from there, I had a couple of 5-6 years of commercial banking, large bank experience, and had another friend who basically said, "Look, I'm going back into community banking. Are you interested in being my senior lender?" And that was in 2004. And so 2004 till now, I've been back in community banking, and it's really the only space that I know and that I understand and that I really feel comfortable in. Big banks have a purpose. Community banks serve the communities that they're truly a part of. And that I think that community banks are the heart of the communities that they serve.
Yeah, say a little bit more about that, because I'm curious. You know, we have community banks all over the state, right, and they serve in that community. I wonder if people are familiar with the types of things that banks really are doing in the community. If everybody really is fully aware of the role that they play, sure, in sort of the social fabric of that network.
One of our favorite family Christmas movies is It's a Wonderful Life. And if you think of It's a Wonderful Life, or just watch It's a Wonderful Life, it is a true discussion about what a community bank does in the community that it serves. And so George goes out, and he's this big, thought-provoking guy that says, "I'm going to travel the world," until something happens to his family that they're running the savings and loan bank there. And Mr. Potter's this mean old greedy guy that is trying to basically buy up everything that he can, and George goes and he saves the old Bailey bank, and he basically says, look, if we can keep all of our money right here, your money goes into financing that person. If you keep your dollars here, it finances your neighbor's house. It finances their car. It gives them a better life. It gives them that opportunity to build that business that they've always wanted to do. And as George is not involved, then he sees, because he didn't have that caring side, that all of a sudden it goes to Pottersville. And Pottersville is where everybody, it's just the slums, and everybody has to rent from the guy who has all the money and this, that, and the other. But where the true community side comes together is that people have put their money into an institution that gives back to their community, that wants their community to be better than what it was yesterday and better tomorrow than what it is today. And so the community bank side is truly to support. We're the guys that are at the ball field. We're the coaches. We have the moms that are the soccer moms. We have the advertisements that are going on the Little League football stadium or on the field, and we're the people in the programs, and you just don't see that any longer with some of the big institutions. And generally the big institutions, you're here, they're very easy to deal with, but whenever your money's there, it's not being loaned out generally in your community. It's going somewhere else, generally out of state and to a larger community.
We had on this program John Allison, who was the former CEO of BB&T, and he talked about how his first job was basically at a community bank, and he attributes so much of what he learned as a CEO of BB&T to that experience at the lowest levels of a small local bank, and how he was doing sort of menial tasks and this and that, but because of that, he learned how to be a manager. He learned what everyone was dealing with at all levels of the bank, and he always took that knowledge with him. I'm wondering if you feel that in your role, that knowing what every piece of everyone's job might be.
Whenever I said that I left from a big bank, I left from John Allison's big bank.
Oh, wow.
I learned in John Allison's big bank how to be a commercial lender. I learned how to be a manager. I learned how to have true core values that you basically, if you're not repeating your core values and asking the question, what did I do today that attributes to my core values, maybe you should back up and take a look at what focus you need to work on tomorrow for your core values of your organization. John Allison was an excellent leader. He ran a fantastic bank. He and Kelly King both together were what I always call the dynamic duo. And John Allison taught me that whenever it's time to say, I'm done with work, then I'm done with work. He always took he would take 2 weeks off, and he would go and he would meditate and read and just basically come to know himself better. And then he would come back refreshed, regained, and he was recharged and ready to go again. And so we learned that in the BB&T world, and I certainly don't push back that I've been in a big bank, but I do truly learn and feel as though a community bank is where my heart is, and it's where my family's heart is. And as a community bank, we live, work, and play as a family. And so it's a family environment around our bank. It's a family environment within the community banks throughout the state of Alabama. I've noticed very much so that we all lean on one another. Whenever we had tough times during COVID, we were on weekly calls finding out what other institutions are doing. Not that we tried to recreate the wheel, it was simply because we wanted to make sure that if we were doing something that another bank was doing or not doing, that we could all sort of help one another. If they needed masks, if they needed gloves, if they needed the plexiglass, however, here's who we're dealing with. Here's where you can get the supplier from. So we all tend to bring and come together. You know, one of the first things that happened after the travesty of the tornadoes coming through Selma a few weeks ago, our state banking association very quickly uploaded and said, any banks that want to donate to this cause, please, here's how you can do that, and do it through the association. So I look at it as a professional organization. We all have opportunities to lean on one another. On the ride here, I was actually reaching out to a CEO over in Tuscaloosa, asking a personal favor for my niece who needs to do an interview for one of her classes. And so we lean on one another in that way. And that's what I see that community banks do in the state of Alabama.
Well, Chad, I want to thank you very much for taking the time to be on the show, for taking the time to speak to our students today, and for continuing to support Troy University. It's really inspirational to hear you talking to our students, and I'm glad that you are able to do that today. Thank you. Absolutely.
Thank you for the opportunity. I always love coming back to Troy, getting to see things that are anew and things that are not so much. It's been a fantastic day, and I appreciate the hospitality and the opportunity.
Well, thank you. This has been a program of the Sorrell College of Business Success Stories. Thank you very much for watching.